Why did you decide to do this? Because you could like be running a small country somewhere, and
Definitely
the
not.
arc for like sometimes you're doing music in Nashville and you're just doing your best because you feel like this is what your heart beats. But it's actually for people that aren't in the business, it's
Mm,
actually could be kind of rugged. What are some of the challenges with being an artist that's doing this
mm.
professionally that sometimes people wouldn't be thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me, at least from a challenge perspective, is as an artist, you really have to be vulnerable with your art, with yourself. You have to put yourself out there consistently. You have to share these pieces of your heart through music that feel like these little babies that you've been, like raising up for
Yes.
months and months. And then you have to like put them out in the world. And sometimes people love them and sometimes people absolutely hate them. And it's just like, I feel like navigating that has been maybe the biggest struggle for me over the years of just being in my art, but not being my art, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, to put a finer point on that, being
Mm,
in your art, but not like being it, that you could release it and you could disassociate yourself perhaps with how somebody reacts to what you've
totally.
created. You're just going to release beautiful things into the world and then people can interact with them however they like or ignore it
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah, I mean, I think identity obviously is a struggle that a lot of us have in just in our daily lives. And for me, as an artist, especially, like part of our job, especially in Christian, I would say the Christian denomination is to get into our feelings and get into these maybe deeper, darker places where God meets us with his mercy and with his love. And so sometimes that can feel like it is me on display. It's pieces of my story that people get to just experience and either connect with or not. And so in the past, I've definitely felt this like preciousness about it. But I would say in the last several years, even doing my own work with my identity and where I root myself in, I, I've become more free from that. It's rather than it being me, it's just pieces of my story. It's pieces of the way that I've viewed God and experienced God in my life over the past couple of years. And people get to connect with that or not, but it really is just pieces of me rather than me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
So
it makes a ton of sense. It's
yeah,
a lot of people that listen to this podcast, faith is a big deal for them, and
yeah,
others not so much. And so wherever you're coming from in your faith expression or adventure, Jesus was talking to his friends. He said it was in Matthew 13. He said he never spoke to anybody without telling them a story or two.
mm,
And I like that. One of the, a little bit later, one of his friends said, like, why are you always telling parables? And the crazy part is, he said, it's so they won't understand. Isn't that crazy? So you think of the parables kind of like a metaphor for life is like a basket of laundry. But he said, I speak that if it's for them, they're going to get it. And if it's not for them, they're not going to
uh,
get it. I would think as a singer songwriter, it'd be like, I sing parables. And
mm,
then if it's for you, you're going to get it. And
yeah,
if it isn't for you, if you want to tap your
yeah,
foot or turn the channel, it's like, I'm
yeah.
just going to release, I'll say true stuff. And then you just decide how you're going to interact with that.
Exactly. That's a great way of describing it. I
Yeah.
really love that.
I
Yeah.
was talking to somebody that just this last couple of days, and they said, I want to be a speaker.
Mm,
And they said, tell me about being a speaker. And I said, well, it's actually kind of a weird career choice. I'd be a speaker because you feel like you have something to say.
mm,
Don't be a speaker and then try to come up with something to say.
mm,
Say, I'm a speaker because I've got something to say. I've got a message. I'm Paul Revere. I'm going to
mm,
get this message out to somebody who needs it. I would think is the same apply to a musician that
mm.
you write music because you've got something to say in music, in lyric, in
Yeah.
like instrumentation. I feel like I've got this art. And then if people misunderstand the story, I'm actually okay with that. Is that okay with you if people
Yeah.
misunderstand what you do?
Definitely. I mean, all the time, I feel like I have people who write to me and say, this song hit me in this season because of this specific thing I'm walking through. And it had nothing to do with why I wrote the song. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about art is that it can kind of like take on a different form on people's lives depending on what they're
Mm.
walking through. And in order to do that, you have to be vulnerable and you have to release it. You just have to get it out into the world and allow it to take on a life of its own, and connect with people in the way that it needs to. And so I think that's been the most exciting part about being an artist, for sure, is releasing these songs that just feel like they're in me, or sometimes they get downloaded. It just depends on the moment, but releasing these pieces, these little reflections of how, for me as a Christian artist, how God has been moving in my life, and seeing how that makes its way into other people's stories. It's such a privilege.